Hello, everyone. Welcome to Grace Every Day, a podcast for Christian wives of blue-collar guys to help them get healthier and happier. Today's episode is all about how opportunities are a byproduct of growth. Now, back a few episodes back in episode 12, I talked about the importance of growth and why growth and self-development is important. And today's podcast is a little bit different, just talking about how when we grow, what happens and why opportunities just seem to multiply or just seem to come much more naturally after we grow. So a couple of key points and a couple of key stories to share on that. Number one, first and foremost, growth positions you. When you grow, you are prepared when the opportunity arises. And you may not can see the opportunities in front of you unless if you haven't grown enough to see over other things. Just like when we physically grow, we get taller. When we grow in terms of spiritual growth or character growth, we can see more. We can see over other things, right? Just like our physical body will get taller, we can see over a fence or see over the countertop. When we grow figurative, or when we grow literally, spiritually and character, we can see over other things. We can see more than we could see before. Sometimes we can see more than other people if they haven't grown. And so growth really positions you to be able to see opportunities, to be able to recognize opportunities. And that's something that you don't really grasp until you start to grow. And then you look back and you go, wow, I can see things differently now, right? So you just have to invest up front in the growth, and then the opportunities will come. Because that growth does just position you much more naturally to see those opportunities as they arise, to be able to see them, quickly identify them, and then take advantage of them. Now, what happens when you don't grow? Of course, the opportunity will pass you by, and sometimes you don't even know it. And that's the interesting thing, right? A lot of times when we feel like the season of life is too busy, we're like, I don't have time for character development or spiritual growth or time to invest in, reading books and things like that. Then we don't even know sometimes the opportunities that are passing us by. I've seen this happen over and over again as a leader in an organization where I was, partial to or privy to conversations about potential upcoming talent and potential upcoming opportunities for people, and then whether they were prepared for those opportunities. And I have seen people get passed over for promotions, for projects, for opportunities because they were not prepared. And the leadership team didn't feel like they were ready, that they had invested in themselves to be ready for that opportunity. And it absolutely happens. Now, it happens in life too, not just in a career or in the workspace. But it's an important thing to realize, is that sometimes those opportunities are coming and going, and we're not even aware of it. So making sure that we are intentional with that growth. Again, I talked in episode 12 how to be intentional with a growth and development plan. So if you didn't catch that, go back and listen to that podcast episode as a follow-up. Well, number two, growth prepares you. Again, when we think of those opportunities just arising, number one, we have to be able to see them. But number two, we do have to be prepared for them. I can remember several opportunities that came my way and I wasn't prepared for them. Most memorably probably are a couple of job interviews for jobs I was applying for. And, I had enough resume experience, qualifications, whatever, to get the actual interview, but I didn't get the job. And, sometimes that's because you're not the greatest fit or another candidate comes along. But I can think of two specific instances that I definitely felt like it was my lack of preparation. Like I just wasn't the person who needed that opportunity. I wasn't the person who could have been the best fit for that role. And, that's kind of the thing about growth, is you have to be able to grow in order to develop, to get those experiences and opportunities. And sometimes it's the experiences and opportunities that help you grow. So my point being here that growth does prepare you. Number one, be intentional about your growth. But number two, don't be afraid to reach out for new opportunities and experiences, and recognize that you might not yet be prepared for them, but the stretch is what helps us grow often, right? A lot of times we stretch to take on something, a project or an opportunity or a new idea, and sometimes we're not yet ready, but we're able to stretch and become the person who can accomplish it. So it's really important to just keep that perspective. Again, looking for those opportunities and being intentional about taking advantage of them, recognizing that sometimes the opportunity that is bringing you is the opportunity for growth. And that's, a different perspective on it, right? Seeing a job interview come by and you didn't get the job, it's very easy to say, well, I either wasn't prepared or I wasn't the right fit or whatever. But don't miss that experience is an opportunity in and of itself, even if you didn't get the job. So, number 3, growth produces fruit. And that's one of those things that you don't really understand until you start to grow, or you don't understand the power of it until you start to grow. Because I've shared in this podcast before on a couple of episodes back how like my first book was like 64 pages and they were like little bitty 4-inch pages, right? And then today I sit down and I just write a book and it just flows, and I have a hard time just editing out what doesn't fit because I've grown so much more. I mean, now I have many, many books, and I recognize that fruit of book writing, of producing content, has come from growth over the years. I just didn't have a lot of that growth in that personal development space as much as I needed back in 2014 when I started writing books. And then today I look around and have so many ideas and content and thoughts for books that I just, it's ideas are never the problem these days. It's figuring out what's the best idea to spend time and effort and put energy into. My point being here that growth produces fruit, and we don't always know what fruit we're going to get, figuratively, of course, until we grow. And I would almost guarantee you it's probably not what you expect most of the time. And that's okay, right? Just being committed to that growth journey. Because the opportunities are a byproduct. You can't go wrong with that. I remember, just keep in mind that growth should be multi-dimensional. There are many dimensions of life, right? But don't neglect both our character and our competency and spiritual growth as well. John 15:5 reminds us, I am the vine and you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. So it is very easy. A lot of times when I focus on how important it is to grow and develop yourself and that intentional self-development, I'm talking about that in terms of character. Of course, we need to grow and develop in terms of competency as well. But character is usually the main focus when I talk about growth. But I don't want you to miss the point that spiritual growth is also important, and we cannot neglect that because that is what's going to give us that foundation of faith, right? That grounding. And that's kind of where what brings us to number 4, what I wanted to talk about today. Growth gives you roots. Growth will give you roots. We have to be grounded in order to withstand the storms of life. Life is going to bring storms to marriage and family and work and even your health, right? There are going to be challenges, and we have to be rooted and grounded firmly into a foundation that is going to help us stand strong in those storms. 2 Peter 3:18 reminds us to grow in the grace and knowledge of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. So keeping that in perspective, that it is important to grow just as much in character and competency and spiritual growth as well. So don't miss that. A lot of times culturally, we focus on the growth of competency, and there's nothing wrong with that. If your dream is to get a job in a field that you need a college degree, then go get the college degree, right? But if you are always focusing on just competency, you're missing the opportunities that character growth and spiritual growth will bring you. And I can look back over the years and I can tell you far more of the opportunities than I've been able to take advantage of have happened because I had been developing who I was as a person, not just what I knew how to do. I can think of some specific ones, being asked and invited to deliver a TEDx talk. That had far more to do with who I was as a person and character growth, and being the person who could have that idea or sharing, but then also deliver that in a clear, concise message, and being able to do that in the time frame that I was given. Being invited to speak at the United States Capitol, that happened simply by, forming a relationship with somebody, and then that when they needed a speaker for that particular event, for that particular date, they reached out, and I had already been growing and developing myself. So I was prepared when that opportunity came. But the preparation comes before the opportunity comes, right? I had to be preparing and developing myself. And when the opportunity came, there wasn't much notice. It was just simply take advantage of that. The opportunity to be on Dr. Phil's primetime show, same way, like that whole process happened very, very quickly. And I had to be the person that they were looking for. And that came down to being prepared and having developed myself so that when the opportunity came, I was already ready. So when we look back at opportunities in life, that's often what happens, is that the growth comes first, right? And then that's why sacrifice and growing and developing ourselves is difficult, is because we feel the loss first with sacrifice. We always feel the loss of what we're giving up before we get the benefit of the thing we're giving up for. And that principle applies to anything, but it's really critical here because growth isn't always fun. I talked about that in episode 12. And it does require sacrifice, right? You could be doing something that might be more fun, that might be more enjoyable in the moment, but it's not going to give you the byproduct of an opportunity. And so you have to be willing to sometimes sacrifice the fun of the moment, the enjoyment of the moment, and being willing to delay the gratification until you get the reward and the benefit of that growth. And it could take years. And so being mature enough to understand that concept and apply that principle, working intentionally in our growth, again, it doesn't have to be all day, but being prepared, preparing ourselves a little bit every day, so that we are ready. We're able to see the opportunities sooner and much easier, and we're prepared for them when they arrive. And when they do, we're able to continue the growth after the experience or through the experience in and of itself. Now, the number one thing that I hear, and if you're watching or listening to this podcast, you're already bought into the concept of growth and developing yourself at some level, or you wouldn't be listening to a podcast on growth and development. But the number one challenge that I hear from most women, from most blue collar wives, is that there is just not enough time in the day to be intentional with growth. I hear the same excuse applied for exercise and eating healthy, and pretty much anything else that we think is good, that we have to be intentional about. It's hard to do, right? It's difficult to do. But don't make excuses. If this is that important, that critically important to your success, however you define success in life, and whatever dimension of life that you want, you have to be intentional about becoming the person who can achieve that. But don't make excuses. I always say you can make something happen or you can make an excuse, but you can't make it happen while you're making the excuse. Tim Elmore said, if you don't have time for what matters, you need to stop doing things that don't matter. that quote is so powerful. If you don't have time for what matters, you need to stop doing things that don't matter. And you and only you can decide that. Remember, life is tough, but God's grace is enough. Until next time.